getting the shine level on your materials right is important, as we go through great lengths as designers to specify different shines for different things. I've got some materials in here, such as my black paint SG or semi-gloss, that are really just a solid color but need the right shine. What I'll do is to go into that materials section and double click on that black paint SG. This will pull it up in the material editor, and I can start to configure this material. Again, because this material was using a shader effect shader in Maya, it's got just a default 50% gray. You can either leave this one in or replace it with a constant vector of your own. It's up to you. I'm going to take this one out and create a new vector just so we can see how this is done. What I'll do is to press and hold 3, as we can see here on the side under constants. A constant 3 vector has that hotkey of 3. So in the view, I'll press and hold 3 and left click and hold, and it creates that constant vector. Now I'll connect this over to my base color. It's a black paint, and I can either leave it as a constant or bring it just off black if I want. I'll double click on the color, and there's this color picker. I'll work in sRGB, and I'm going to bring the value up just ever so slightly, just to bring it off exactly black. I'll click OK, and now I'm going to add in some shine to it. After all, this is a black paint semi-gloss, so it's not a super gloss. What we can see in here is right now it's got a default glossiness and roughness to it, a little bit of shine. A lot of these properties are actually grayscale. They can be controlled by a single number. So I'll put a constant in by pressing and holding 1 and clicking in the view, and I'll drag this constant into specular. Now this makes it a completely matte surface because the specular of 0 means it is exactly not shiny. I'll put in a value here by clicking and dragging on that value up to maybe, let's say 0.6 or thereabouts. And we can see this material definitely gets a little bit of sheen to it. Now I'll bring in some roughness. Again, putting in a constant by pressing and holding 1 and clicking in the viewport, and then connecting to the roughness. With a roughness of 0, I get a very shiny surface, as we can see here by this reflection sphere. What I'll do for the roughness is give it just a little bit. We want to spread the light on that surface just a touch, maybe in the 0.2 range. So I get a fairly shiny surface with a little bit of roughness but not a lot, and it's almost black. What we're seeing here is that in physically based materials, the things like specular and roughness, how shiny is it and how does the light spread on the surface, control how much reflection there is. If you're used to an arbitrary reflection coefficient, we need to look further than that into how materials physically work. That's a function of the shine and the roughness in it, and also if it's a metallic or not. I'm going to bring up this roughness just a little bit more. I want something going on in the reflection, but not a really clear reflection. This looks pretty good. Of course, I'll have to see it in the light, but it's a good way to get that value going fairly quickly. Now, I'll save this, clicking on the Save button to save the asset, and then close this tab, and we should see this material applied in black in the scene. I'll go back in, dashing, well, right through the glass in this case, panning up to show that staircase, and we can see here on the stair stringers I've got that black in there. This is also applied on the C channel. That's the trim here on the floor. What I've done is to assemble a C channel and an angle on top of it to catch that floor decking, where we've cut through for that stair, and I've painted it all in that semi-gloss black. It's also here on our baseboard, and now that really looks good in comparison to the channel that's right above it, which again needs some work in the material. It's got a nice contrast between the white wall, which is done with a texture, the channel, and then the flush baseboard. Maybe it's a paint grade MDF or something similar. It's important to get those basic paints right, really making sure that the solid colors look right in here, as well as all the things with texture. Now I'll deal with my white concrete, which is actually on the stairs, and fine-tune that one. I'll double-click on the material, and here in this material, again, we can see it was a shader effect shader, and so it's got just a 50% gray going. I'll take this and delete it, and I'll put in another constant 3 vector. I'll connect this across to my base color, and then double-click on this color and bring it up almost all the way to white. Because it's white concrete, sometimes I'll add in just the tiniest touch of color. littlest bit of warmth in there, and it's just the slightest bit warm in there, a very, very low saturation. I'll even pull that down a little more, so it's just not exactly pure white. I'll hit OK, and then I'll connect a specular and a roughness using a constant again. Again, landing one in by pressing and holding 1. I'll drag this up to specular to connect, and I'll give it a spec value of just a little bit, 0.3, 0.35, somewhere in there. Then I'll give it some roughness. For this, the roughness is going to be very high. What we see here is that a roughness of 0 again makes it very, very shiny. So I'm going to bring this way up. So we see a roughness of 0.9 or close to. It's a nice bright surface that lights and shines well with almost no reflection in it, just a little bit of a glaze, maybe around 0.8 or so. But again, we'll have to see it in the scene to really judge it. Now that I've got this in, I can save this material and I should see this white concrete on my steps. It's applied through and it looks pretty good. We should go through the materials and make sure that all the solid colors are configured properly. One more, for example. Here's a charcoal paint flat. I'll take out the 3 vector and put in one of my own. For this, I'll connect to the base color and give it a charcoal color. I'm going to say it's a charcoal, and if you're going to match a paint spec or sheet, for example, you can match in either RGBs or by eye. I'm going to dim this way down into charcoal and then give it just the tiniest touch of warmth. I like my charcoal to have a little bit of color undertone to it. For this, although it's a flat, I need to dial in the sheen to be correct. I'll put in that vector 1 onto the specular, and for the spec, I'll put it in at just about 0.1, just a little bit of sheen to it. For the roughness then, because it's a flat paint, I'll take that roughness way up. Because I don't have a ton of spec on this, a roughness right around 0.6 will do nicely. There's the littlest bit of shine, which is really, when the light glances across it, can we tell it's not a dead surface? But outside of that, there's almost no reflection. I'll save it and check out my scene. What you can always do in here, if you need, is to hit play at any point. What we can see here is that I've got my default player controller, well, sort of over the front. I'll make sure I select it and pull it just onto that front walkway, or even right into the room. And I can use that character viewer to see where I am. I'll pull it down so I don't immediately collide with the stairs and hit play. What we can see here is that it's starting to work as a space. My slate is looking really good. My stairs are the black and white concrete treads and black stringers I wanted. And the trim is really starting to stand out. There's some things I need to pay attention to, such as the wood doors and the missing brick. We can also see here I've got some doors shimmering because I was cloning around those blueprints for use later. It's coming together though, so now we can take the time to go through and configure all the materials, making sure the shines really show up on everything.